So this month, a few weeks ago, the Commission made this long-awaited proposal to amend the EU climate law and include a target to reduce emissions by 90% by 2040. So let's do a bit of a recap here. Why did you make this proposal and why now?
Yes, the European climate law. The amendment is intended to add a climate target for 2040. So how many emissions do we need to reduce by 2040 as Europe to be on track towards becoming climate neutral and resilient by 2050? This has been embedded in the first European climate law that we proposed back in 2020 and was agreed in 2021, I think. So we have targets in place, as I hope everybody knows, for 2030, with quite detailed policy architecture, different instruments that contribute to driving the emission reductions. We have national targets, we have the emissions trading system, we have CO2 standards for cars, we have standards on and rules for fluorinated gases. We have many different policy angles, and of course also working with other DGs so that their policies and instruments contribute, and a lot of that is also through the energy dimension, so renewable energy, energy efficiency, low carbon energy, etc. But basically, not only is it a legal requirement in the climate law that we had to make a proposal for 2040, but we also felt that, if you look at the targets for 2030 and then climate neutrality in 2050, it was a long period, and it would be really beneficial if we set this milestone for 2040 so that you give clarity to everyone that, also in the next decade, your investments and your efforts to reduce your emissions will be economically viable, right? We're staying the course, and I think that was a little bit the challenge for this new mandate to say, are we staying the course? Look at all the geopolitics. Others are maybe, reconsidering or backtracking with the US leaving the Paris Agreement, but very much and very important that we do stay the course, and this 2040 target is really part of that. Now, we have made that proposal for a net 90% emission reduction by 2040, so that brings us very close to climate neutrality, which implies that we have to have a major transformation still. We've been already making good progress. We're at minus 37 emission reductions by now compared to 1990, but still a long way to go as well. And I think the transformation in society, again, on the energy side, industry side, transport side, innovation, we need massive innovation and rollout of all these clean technologies is what's needed now. So again, the predictability of having that milestone there and as the basis for our future policy package for the next decade is super important.
Okay. This target is a bit more complicated maybe than the 2030 or the 2050 goals, politically and technically. So can you tell us how and why you have introduced flexibilities in the 2040 target?
Yes, thanks for that question. As I said, 2040 doing net 90% reduction in 2040 indeed implies that we can no longer do incremental emission reductions. We will need these new technologies, and there you can think of direct air capture, you can think of bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, e-fuels, sustainable aviation fuels. So all these things which do exist, because we always underline that, the technologies do exist to do it, but they are not yet at scale and they're not yet commercially deployed. So that we will really need to make happen. It also means that it's maybe less obvious that we will be able to deploy all those technologies, at scale. And that's what indeed, I think, sometimes makes people nervous, as in, is it really feasible? And that's also where we really need to ensure that the policies provide the enabling framework and the support, of course, also from finance, the support for making those investments, because it is a risk if you want to, go into clean tech and low carbon, new business approaches, etc., production processes. There is a big risk because it's also not so clear that there will be the demand, right? I mean, are we all going to buy more green products, So we need to bring that together, and that's the reassurance we will need to craft together in the policy package for the next decade, that we really try and again have a coherent approach like we did with the Fit for 55 package as well, but to now also, to strengthen the incentives also for the very new or breaking ground technologies and approaches, because it will be, as I said, a major societal effort. Of course, also very important angle is to to have that dialogue with society at large. I think we're having it. We have lots of structured dialogues with all the different sectors. But I think the challenge is always, and you are in communication, but how to explain to the man in the street, right, what this means and what it implies for him or her. So that we also very much need to do, because otherwise we have this disconnect between, a big group of people driving the transition and the other ones perceiving it as in, but why do we need to do it? How does this relate to maybe also the climate impacts that I do experience in the street? And to bring that together in order to, of course, have the necessary public support, because that is, of course, something you always need in order to make the next step in policy making.
Okay, interesting. Now looking a bit ahead, was the 2040 target disagreed? What comes next?
Yeah, it's funny you ask, because there's always the next, right? It's never finished. First, we need to find agreement between the co-legislators on the climate law, on the 2040 target. Beginning of July, the presidency has gone to Denmark, and the Danish presidency is very, very determined to try and get an agreement in the council. So that is with the member states, hopefully in September. All of this also driven because in the context of the international agenda and the Paris Agreement and the COP30 in Belém in November, all countries have been asked to step up and come with new commitments. So for Europe, we want to also show at the international level what we plan to do for 2040 with an intermediary point for 2035. Also, this is called the nationally determined contributions. And we want to bring that to the COP, right? To also say we take our responsibility. We continue to show EU leadership, hoping that other countries will do the same. So that is a little bit the time pressure. We first need agreement in co-decision. And when we have that, it will be the basis for the policy package for the next decade, which we also hope to work on hard in the coming 12 or 18 months. We hope to make a proposal maybe by the end of 26, or that's still to be confirmed politically. But it's again with a view to then negotiating those policy proposals, have them in place preferably by 2028 or this mandate under the von der Leyen mandate still, so that again you give predictability to the different sectors that what the rules will be for the next decade. And that sounds far away, but it's actually not so far away. If we would have them in place in 28, then as of 2031 it starts. So this is important, and it is going to be complex. As you said, we have to look again at all our different policy proposals, our own in DG Klima, but also the interaction with the energy policies, with the transport policies, with the agriculture policies, because clearly all sectors will need to contribute. I mean, if you want to become climate neutral, there's no single sector that can be left behind or not be asked to contribute. And this will be, a very interesting and intense exercise again, I'm sure.
Okay. And my last question is about the EU's long-term budget. The Commission made this proposal yesterday. That must have big implication for how we reach our climate targets.
Yes, indeed, you're right. We're very happy with the new proposal from the Commission for a new EU budget, which would run from 28 till 34. Because if you look back at our own impact assessment for what the 2040 target entails, but also expert reports such as from Mr. Draghi or Mr. Letta, it's very clear that to drive this decarbonization, we do need to see enormous investments in the energy sector, in the transport sector, and basically, again, across society. So the EU budget has a very important role in that. It is, of course, public money. It is EU-level money. And if you look at the necessary investments, you can quickly see that, there will need to be public money, but a lot of private sector money as well. And I think this is triggered by the EU-level money, because we can leverage the national funding and you can leverage private funding. And we have now the different building blocks of this EU instrument, of this EU budget, whereby on the one hand, the EU level money will, in partnership with the member states, with the national and regional plans, we will be looking at, okay, how can EU money and national public funding go hand in hand? And we will very much also work on competitiveness and clean tech through the European Competitiveness Fund, where there it is more to use the EU public money to de-risk the necessary investments in clean tech. Also infrastructure, we have the Connecting Europe facility. So it's all about how to make the best use of public money to trigger for the same priorities. And of course, our priority is decarbonization. and to trigger those investments that need to happen. So this is again a very, very important signal. We've also seen that member states already in the discussions on the climate law have said, yes, okay, well, yes, we sign up to climate neutrality. We may sign up to a 2040 target, but how is the EU going to help? And I think the EU always helps with its EU budget, but also with the policies, of course. We have strong European instruments. We have the emissions trading system. We have many other things. So that is, and not to forget that the EU public budget is one thing, and we will have a 35% share for climate and environment and resilience. And that amounts to more or less 700 billion euros. That is really a good achievement. It builds on what we have in the current budget, where we had a 30% share, but also 10% for biodiversity, etc. So it's a very important signal that we stay the course. There will be support for the green transition and the clean transition. But I wanted to just mention ETS revenues are also going to be very, very important in that regard, because that's also billions of money. We will have our innovation fund, and we will probably have other funds when we make the proposal for the ETS review for the next decade. And there is a clear requirement in all that legislation that all of those billions also need to be used to drive the transition. So it's about bringing the different funds or pots of money, how we call it, together to really drive the transition, but also to support people when they are maybe in more vulnerable situations, when they have are subject to energy poverty or transport poverty. Because of there, of course, we have the social climate fund that will play an important role, and that we hope to start with as of next year.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.